In this session, we're going to look at how to use a case statement. So far, I've been using a nested if then else statement. Now, to remind you about the nested if then else statement, what we have is multiple conditions. So we have an if statement, a condition with a Boolean operand, in this case, are they equal to? And then we have the part of the condition which is true, which is the then part, and then we have the else part, which is false. So in a nested if then else statement, just to recall, if the number is set to 1, if number equals 1, then trace number 1. And once it's finished tracing 1, because this part is true, it would leave the nested if then else structure and then trace the end. If the number happens to be 2, then if the number is equal to 1, which it's not, it then does the false part, which is the else. Inside the else, we have another if statement. So this is where the nesting comes. If number equals 2, it should then trace the number 2, and then once that is completed, it will drop out of the structure and trace the end. To see this in action, we can run the program and we can see number 2 and the end. So at any time, when the condition is true, it then jumps out of the structure. So hence, if the number is 3, the computer would actually work its way through all these structures down to, is the number 2? No, it's not. Well, else. If the number is 3, then trace number 3. So our final output will be 3. So how does a case statement make our life easier, and how does it improve our coding? Well, a case statement is a little bit different. It actually uses a thing called a switch statement. In some programming languages you'll see the word case, but in our case we're actually using a switch. So when the program comes in, the number is set to 1, and n number stores 1 in a variable, and then you need to switch n number. So they relate. And what this means is take the contents of the variable and then compare it against the conditions. In this case here, we have case 1, case 2, case 3. So if number 1 is equal to 1, then it will trace out number 1. Case it is 2, it will trace out number 2. Case it 3, it can trace out 3. Now, at any time these conditions are true, once it has finished its operation, and we can have as many lines as we like between the end of the colon and the break tag. Once it hits the break tag, it then jumps out of the structure and then prints the end. So in this case here we're set to 1, and what we'll do, we'll just move back here and remove this text or our coding. So it's the only program now, and so when we run our program we should see number 1 if we kept our variable declaration, which I just deleted. So I just need to declare n number again. So when we run our program now, we can see number 1 and the end. So if we then change number 1 to number 3, it should go down our list, find 3, conduct the number 3, and then break out of our structure, which it's done. There is also what's called a default. So at the end of our list, if there was another number or a number not 1, 2, or 3, we can actually carry out another operation. So we can actually put default, and we can actually go trace, not, using the quote, not in list. So if we run the program now, you'll notice that we still get the number 3, but if I change number 3 to say number 5, which doesn't occur in our list, we get an output called not in list. So therefore the case statement can actually be used as a condition check to make sure things are true, otherwise it can send back an error message, or if they're outside of a range, etc., we can always use the default to feed information back to the user. Now, as I was saying before, we can have multiple lines of instructions. So I can actually trace something else in here. So this is the second line of code. We can use our toolbar to straighten it up. You notice it has a new structure at the moment. So we can have as many lines of code. We can actually carry out if statements in here and decisions. We can actually call other functions. We can start timers, end timers. We can run different sounds from this point. So if I change our number back to 1, we should have 2 lines of output. So now you can see we've got number 1, and this is the second number and the end. So you can see the trace statement's a little bit more easier to manage than the previous nested if then else statement. Also, with a case statement, we can have 500, 600 lines of code, and it'll be a lot easier to manage. And it's a good idea to keep the numbers sequential if you're working up and down. The other thing you can use is text. So at the moment we've got it set up to numbers, but if I actually use text as conditions, like Earl Marsden, maybe I'm checking usernames, it must match the absolute character Earl Marsden as this is for it to be true. So if the user puts it in as capital Earl Marsden, then this won't result true, and therefore it must be an absolute, so it's got to be like an equals. Anyway, I hope this helped clarify what a case statement does and how to use one.